we weren't there in those times, but we have a knowing, right? We have this innate knowing. Just like I believe all of the gifts that we have are within us, they're all there. I think it's our job as humanity, as human beings, to help each other uncover what that is, because it's already all there, right? And so I think that the only way, I mean, I've never gone wrong with being loving, right? Have you? I've never gone wrong with spreading love. And I mean, it again, sometimes love is hard. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Hey, everybody. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 125 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. My guest today is awesome. Her name is Francisca Perez, and gosh, she's very wise. I love the conversation that we have today. She is a person who wears many hats. One of the things she does is she works in the corporate world and has for many years. She is a self empowerment coach. She is a motivational speaker, a very natural motivational speaker. And she is a soft skills facilitator. She was certified under Stephen Covey. And today we really talk about not just spirituality, but the importance of walking in our purpose, the importance of being accountable for who we are and how we live and how we move through the world, the importance of being kind and just living in humanity and human goodness. It's a really wonderful conversation. And as I said, she's a very wise person inherently, and I just love what she shares. One of the things that we talk about in this conversation and it has really stayed with me is how we can swim with the current or against the current, how we can walk in our purpose and the way that we are aligned with, for me, God, our higher power, that divine source, how we can walk aligned with that. And that only means, in my view, just our will is God's will. What we want really in our heart and soul, God doesn't want anything different for us. And so if we walk along those lines and we really do the things that inspire us and motivate us and what we feel called to do, if we try to do those things without fear, then it happens. Wonderful things unfold. But I think I know what can be true for myself is fear can arise. Oh, if I go down this path, you know, I've got to pay these bills and I've got to um, uh, be realistic about what I can do versus or what I want to do versus my obligations. And the other thing that I have come to learn and see in my own life is that God works it out. God is always working it out for me, as Abraham Hicks would say. And that really is true when we pursue our dreams and we walk aligned with what inspires us. And that really came up for me in this conversation because what I was reminded of is God is always here for us. And it's a matter of, all right, I want to walk towards this dream now. God will say, okay, I'm right here with you. Or if I want to walk towards this dream 5 years from now, God will say, okay, I am with you. It's my choice when I decide to do that. But God is always here to assist me and to help me. And I just find that it is empowering. It's true. And it's something that I have forgotten at different points in my life. And then when I remember, I really just go ahead and answer the call. So I love that coming up in this conversation. Well, let's get to it. Let's meet her and let's start healing. Welcome, Francesca.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. It's a
I'm,
Monday in December.
oh, yes. Say no more.
Have you had a day?
It has been a day. Oh, yes. But we made it through. We're here.
Good, good, good. Well, we talked recently, and I really thought you are such a wise woman. And
Oh,
you said so many things in our conversation that we had not long ago. And I thought, why don't we talk about this much I know is true? And
mm.
is Maya
Eh,
Angelou the one who said that? I think of her every time I think of those words, or it could be another author.
Do you know, I think a lot of the time I hear Oprah say, this is what I know for sure. So it's kind
Yeah,
of along those lines. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, all right, I'm going to start with, and then you share anything that comes up for you outside of this. But some things that you talked about, and it's Christmas time, which is a time of the birth of Jesus. And I want to say something that I'm always saying, like, Jesus is very important to me. And I'm always trying to get across to people that you don't have to believe in Jesus to be a part of this podcast. But one thing for me about Jesus is it wasn't about whether a person believes that he is the Son of God or not. He was about who he was about. It's like believe in the work he does if you don't want to believe in him. And
Yes.
he knew who he was,
Hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
you said Jesus, you mentioned in the mind of Jesus and thinking of Jesus, you said that he was the human embodiment of who we are. And you said, what I know for sure, I am love.
Absolutely. Listen, I call myself a Christian woman, right? And we spoke a little bit about this. I kind of went through all aspects of what the possibilities of truth are, and we all know that our truth is our truth, right? But at the same time, when it all comes full circle, and at the end of the day, what I know for sure is that a relationship with whatever your spiritual higher being is very, very personal. And what I know is that for me, Jesus's story rocks. I think it is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think of, the way my grandmother taught me scripture and things like that. I couldn't understand it at a young age, but as I get older, simple scriptures, I am the vine, ye are the branches, or I am the lamp that lights your path. I mean, things like that really are telling. I mean, it's the guiding light, right? So how could Jesus's story not be relate directly to me, who I am as a human being, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what I love, I have previous podcast episode earlier this year, and my guest, who is a friend, and we landed on how he was love and he loved us so much that he gave his life for us. I mean, what
Yes.
more can we do for another person?
I think it's the most profound type of love, right? The love of humanity. And I think that that's where we as human beings, right, as the embodiment of what Jesus was. I mean, think about it, dying for us to know that, we are loved, that we are part of God, right? Part of this larger collective, and to die for us not knowing what we do, and not necessarily loving Jesus, really,
Yeah,
right? To die for that. I mean, I'll get mad if somebody steps on my foot, but at the same time, you have to understand what grace is. And, we kind of, again, and I actually heard this in a sermon yesterday at church, because I mean, I didn't really want to go to church because I'm conflicted a little sometimes. And, I said, God, if I'm meant to get there, let me get there. And right now I'm struggling, with my message and what I want to really get out there to the world. And I know that my own authenticity, who I am as a person, is quite enough, you know? And as long as I approach my message with love, that's really what it is, right? I can tell somebody, and you know, I was having these conversations, and you know, I've had conversations on airplanes with atheists and agnostic, and I'm just explaining to them, really, there's nothing for us to do except for be loving, except for tell each other what the good news is. And the good news is that you're light and you're love. And that's all you have to be, really, to impact the world. Because if you change one person, you change the world. And
Yeah.
how profound is that, right? And so that was, to me, that's the message of Jesus, right? I mean, you know, again, whether or not there are all of these conspiracies or whatever. I mean, listen, we weren't there in those times, but we have a knowing, right? We have this innate knowing. Just like I believe all of the gifts that we have are within us, they're all there. I think it's our job as humanity, as human beings, to help each other uncover what that is, because it's already all there, right? And so I think that the only way, I mean, I've never gone wrong with being loving, right? Have you? I've never gone wrong with spreading love. And I mean, it again, sometimes love is hard. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but it's the most graceful. And it is so much better for you to love, because it makes you, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm spreading love, I feel so loved and so loving just inherently, because I'm able to just be. And
Yeah.
that, there's no greater thing than that.
Yeah. Because even if I'm loving someone that is not, or I'm expressing love to someone who's not receiving it, I'm
Mhm.
still being me. No, I cannot not be me, because then that's a problem for me.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it just diminishes who you are in your essence, really, right? If you struggle with love. So this is kind of like how I think about things. This is my principle, and we probably spoke a little bit about this too, is that we're light beings. We are love. We are inherently love. God is love. God is energy. Well, love is energy, right? And so we are with energy is what drives this human vessel that we're walking around in all day long. As miraculous as our bodies are, you know, our light within is contending with all of these external factors, our human flesh, right? That has all of these traumas that, you know, we've experienced traumas that go throughout our body, not just in our mind. So we're dealing with our traumas that are in every cell of our body. We're dealing with hormonal changes. We're dealing with the chemicals and the foods that we eat. We're dealing with environmental chemicals. And yet we're still trying so hard to navigate through all of that with our human self, which is the flesh, which is the sinful nature. I mean, again, we can describe it in any which
Yes.
way, but that light within us is contending with that on a daily basis. So when you are able to let your light win over your flesh and your humanity, or whatever bad day you had, then you are being the embodiment of God in that moment.
Right.
And so that's that's what our that's what we're tasked with, right? Because that's how we connect with one another. We don't connect with one another by being nasty or mean, or, you know, we connect with one another by being loving or sharing something that we relate to. And usually it's vulnerability, right?
Right.
So again, I think that that to me, it's just it's so, it goes so deep, right? It goes so deep. The universe without, the universe within. We're not even.
Yeah. And it requires, I believe, a commitment, to, because you use the word that that light inside of us contends, for me, with our ego, with our human self.
Yep.
And it does require a commitment, because it's very easy for me to get drawn into somebody stepping on my foot, or somebody saying something that rubs me the wrong way. And I'm like, well, why'd you say that? Or why are you looking at me like that?
Yeah.
So, and that can take me down. It could just be a thought that I have that
Mhm.
can take me down a road. So it requires, I call it vigilance,
Mhm.
to stay focused. If for me, if I'm praying, if I'm meditating, then I have more of an armor up, you know,
Mhm.
so that
Oh,
if somebody is coming at me a certain way, then it's not really affecting me so much as if I haven't done that.
oh yeah.
Haven't done that, then I'm more like I said, like, well, what's going on with this person? And, I'll go down a road. But if I have been doing what I need to do, then what I need to do for me, then I'm kind of like, well, that's just where they are today. Doesn't have anything to do with me.
Right. Well, that's when you're most aligned, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of think about it like this, and I tell everybody all the time. One of my favorite stories, and I don't remember the story verbatim at all, but it kind of explains the response of the egg, the potato, and the coffee bean, and boiling water. And if you put an egg into boiling water, the egg hardens. If you put a potato into the boiling water, the potato softens. But if you put a coffee bean into the boiling water, it changes the whole setup of the water. It makes it coffee, right? And so I kind of tell people always, you have to be very responsible for the energy that you bring into another space, because energy is very palpable, and you
Yeah.
can bring somebody down by just not bringing your best self into that moment. The moment is all we have. We only ever have right now. And if I'm responsible for the energy that I bring into a person's space, I'm going to add value, not take away from it. Right. So it's kind of like that. I tell everybody, be the barometer, not the thermometer. We're not trying to be impacted by the energy in the room. We're trying to shift the energy in the room. And that's usually, what I tell people. And it does take work to get there. It's not an overnight thing. It takes constant work, because I can say for myself, I do struggle with thoughts all day long, right? We have, how many thoughts do we have a day? I mean, we're up in the millions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And some we're not even mindful of. Some of them are so, it's just so constant that we can't even pinpoint what we might be thinking in any given point in time.
Right.
What we know is that our moods might shift and it might change. And what I try to do when I feel that maybe a downward trend, I try to get in touch with, well, what did I just feel for why I'm feeling like this right now, and process that. Because if I'm processing and I'm reassessing myself every 5 minutes, then you're going to get a better version of me constantly, because I'm constantly assessing myself every 5 minutes if it takes that, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
So,
Do that too. I think about, well, what was the thought that I had?
mm,
And that lets me know, when I circle back to the thought that I had, that lets me know that I made it up.
yes.
It's not real.
Maybe you didn't make it up. See, because that's what, kind of going back to what I said before. Our memories and our traumas are stored in every cell of our body, right? It's not even necessarily that those memories are stored in our minds. Our minds are moving at a mile a minute, like 10,000 miles a minute, if you will. But if we can hold on to a memory in every cell of our body when something triggers, and I mean, that's on the good side and the bad side. I know when I smell a Christmas candle, I'm brought right back into my
Right.
grandma's house in 1984, when
Right.
they were baking Christmas cookies, or whatever the case is. So again, it's those triggers that you might have, and sometimes
That-
the response is even out of our hands until we process what that emotion is and what that trigger is.
Exactly. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I totally agree. I have a girlfriend that I would talk to about, we both were sexually abused. And, she's talked about it in her books and podcasts and stuff. And when we first became friends and we realized that we each had similar experiences, I asked her, well, she doesn't carry it around. Like, it took a long time for me to heal around this. And I could tell that this isn't something that she carried around. And I asked her about it. And I said, what is that? Like, how do you get through? How did you get through this? Why doesn't this affect you? And
Mhm.
she just said, it just doesn't. Right. And so this was many years ago. And so it was in recent years that I began to understand that she chose to not let that define her.
Mhm.
But I had to it definitely defined my self-esteem. So I had to come through a deeper healing. And she defines it as one of her blessings in life, that she realized that this is not who I am. This does not have anything to do with me. This
Mhm.
happened both, each of our situations happened during childhood. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I internalize that, and that can come up for me, or could come up for me in some ways in trauma. But I also realized that that was a part of my healing. That was my unhealed part of myself.
Oh
And it
yeah.
was so helpful for me to see her and the decision that she made, that is not me. That is not who I am.
Mhm. Interestingly enough, I mean, again, I feel like a lot of the time, and this is a big part of, the thing that I'd like to get out there to people, right? We all have, to some degree, childhood traumas. Some of us have had them in different experiences than others, and one is not diminished by the other,
Right.
but I that what those childhood traumas bring up and what we carry or what we choose to carry, because sometimes it's a choice until it's well, it's not a choice until it
We don't
is.
know.
Let
Right.
me right. it's it's
Yes.
it's it's not a choice until it is, because I think sometimes, depending on how we grow through life, right? We're all in different parts of our journey. None of us, and this is just in my belief, that none of us are really ahead or behind anyone. We're just in different parts of that journey. And it's our duty to take someone who may be in a different part of the journey that you've been through or you've experienced and to try to help them through, to get through what it is that they need to navigate through to get to where they need to get to. If
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm actually a huge fan of, interestingly enough, as a Christian woman, but I am a huge fan of Stoicism. And I don't know if you know, if you
No.
so Stoicism is a philosophy, and so there's a lot. I think it's Epictetus something. I don't know the exact names, but Marcus Aurelius, Seneca. There are a bunch of philosophers who have this belief system, and it's like you're responsible for your life, bottom line, right? And I mean, I know there's a lot of spiritual, there's a lot of spirituality, and their miracles are for sure. Miracles are real, right? But there's also that part of life, that humanity, that human part of us where we are responsible for not being necessarily the victim of our lives. That is not to diminish anything that we've been through. I myself have abandonment issues, I have worthiness issues, and I have struggled with that for my young adult life, my young childhood life, into my grown age I'm 47 years old. At my grown age, I have struggled with that still. But in this moment, I know that you cannot go back in time and seek the validation where that happened to you. And in fact, to some degree, we've all experienced brokenness. That does not mean that we remain broken. We are very whole as we are, right? It's just those parts of us that have broken, we've healed them over, and we can choose to heal them with cement or we can choose to heal them with gold. It's up to us, right? And so that's where we get to choose. And so when we are responsible for ourselves and our lives, then we can say, this is where I choose to place that trauma that happened to me, or I'm going to hold on to it and I'm going to hold on to it tight. And everybody, I'm going to, place blame. And that creates a powerlessness within you, within me, right? Whereas if I just say it happened, there's very little control that I have over what has happened. So then I must free this from my mind, my spirit, to a degree. Again, things happen to us and it's unfair. And sometimes life is unfair, but at the same time, what hope is there in that we can change our energy? We can shift our
Yeah.
focus, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So stoicism is
Yeah.
it the acceptance of a thing that happened?
It's you're responsible for your life, and that's that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's like, if you have no control over it, what good is it to try to maintain control by keeping your thought on it? You
Right.
can control that. So it's best for you to let it go so that you can move forward, so that you can progress in
Yeah.
life,
Yeah. It makes me
Um,
think of us, how we can have a tendency to get caught up in the story of the thing that happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and it even went to it's a narrow-minded person who places blame on others. And it's just there was something else, another term that he used, because I was actually just listening to this today, that said it's something about the person who puts blame on themselves, but the person who can take accountability doesn't do either. They don't place blame and they don't put blame on themselves. They deal with it, they're accountable for it, and they move on. They take responsibility. That's the difference.
And it helps the other person to let it go too. That's what I find. I mean, if I don't like to admit if I made a mistake. I mean, it's hard. I made a mistake. I wish I hadn't. But when I do acknowledge to the other person I made a mistake, especially if it's work related, I mean, period, but that's where it might show up, blatantly for me. I made a
Yeah,
mistake here. What else can be done? A mistake was made. I made a mistake. And it's also about the other person can recognize who you are when you do
right.
that.
Well, you can give them grace, right?
Yes.
Uh, so I heard it put this way. Someone asked a question. I was listening to something, and they're like, have you ever cut someone off in traffic? And they're like, yeah. Well, what happened to you that day that you were cutting someone off in traffic? I wasn't thinking. I was having a bad day. I had to hurry up and get home, and so they acknowledged to making mistakes. Now, what happens when someone cut you off in traffic? They're the worst human being on the planet
Oh,
because
right.
we struggle with giving each other grace. We can
Yeah.
give it to ourselves because we know exactly what we're going through and why we did what we did. So we can be a little bit more forgiving. But when we turn the tables and we think about that with our fellow man, like our fellow person, like they're no different from us. So they may need the same grace that we give ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes. I have to share this story.
Oh,
So I'm a reporter, and years ago, I was covering, there was this hostage situation going on, and the police public information officer was the fill-in, the full-time PIO for the police. He and I had a great rapport. He had a great rapport with everybody. This particular day is the other guy. So this was an all day hostage situation going on. You're trying to get the information from the police PIO. And this guy historically would not give me a lot of information whenever I would call him about something, right? So before I called him, I think I called him and I got a little bit of information. And then I called a former boss who I continued to talk to and would like pick his brain. So I told him, this guy always gives me a really hard time. I said, what should I do? He said, just tell him that, you got it, you're on deadline, you need this information, yada, yada. When I texted the guy, I accidentally texted him my gripe that I was sending to the other person. Okay. So, I mean, I was like, this guy always gives me a hard time. The regular guy's not in, oh my God. I mean, I'm just like, when I hit send, as soon as I hit send, I realized what I did. I'm like, oh my God. So I call my friend. I'm like, oh my God, this is what I did. What do I do? He said, just apologize. He said, just apologize. Tell him that, everything's going at a fast pace. You're on deadline. You're so sorry. And that's what I did. And this man was so cool. No problem. And then he just starts giving me all this information. And from that point on, he was always cool. I mean, I never, normally I might do something like that, but I wouldn't have done that with this guy if my friend didn't really, really suggest that I do it. Because I would have thought, oh, no, no way would he accept my apology. But he more than accepted it. Like you said, he had grace exponentially.
oh yeah. You know what I find too is that when we're able to do that, how beautifully communication flows. And I don't know about you, but I love clear communication, even the ugly parts.
Absolutely.
I have had those moments, and sometimes those are moments of growth. That's what that moment sounds like for me, like a huge moment of growth and realization
For
for
me.
you, even, for both of you, because historically that had not been your relationship with him, correct?
Right.
Until you kind of, this is you laid it out there on the cards, and it wasn't probably pretty initially, but then he probably could understand. Maybe it made him acknowledge and take a step back and say, hey, this is how I'm perceived. And listen, that's growth for a person to say, hey, this is how I'm perceived, and this is not really how I want to be perceived. And
Mhm.
then you have the opportunity to change that. And my goodness, if people were not just more clear with the way they communicated, if we were not just more clear with the way we communicated with one another. My goodness, it kind of makes sense. All of those, adages, oh, closed mouths don't get fed, the squeaky wheel gets the oil and all this stuff. And it's always
Yeah.
negative in a sense, but it actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can recall, having some of the worst and most ugly conversations where I had to get out my emotions that I was storing attached to a narrative that I needed to just get out. And it may not have come out the prettiest, but the beauty on the other side of that conversation is unmatched,
Yeah.
because then I can give grace to, because maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Because the person could feel not only the words, but the emotions of what you were conveying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what you're giving them permission to be either. Because
Yeah.
when you can admit to, hey, you know what, maybe I'm wrong, then maybe they can admit to maybe they're wrong too.
Absolutely.
And then it kind of gives everybody permission to just be authentic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is what I want to ask you,
Yeah.
because you have been spitting all this wisdom here. And you had mentioned in our previous conversation, you studied so much, so many spiritual teachers. You
Yeah.
mentioned Stoicism. You mentioned to me that you studied Neville Goddard,
Oh
Joe
yeah.
Dispenza, Marianne Williamson. I mean, so many people. And what I have found personally from spiritual teachers and all different faiths is that really everything is rooted, or the foundation is all the same, which is what we were talking about, is love. We are love. And
Oh,
that messages that each person or different faiths present may be a little different path to that truth of love.
mhm.
But the love is the foundation. And so I know that and maybe you could talk a little bit about it. I know you have a business in development, and what do you think so far, um your message, what will the theme be, if you not necessarily being specific, but along the lines of what you know is true? What do you think that you're being called to speak to?
Oh yeah, I can absolutely speak to that. I think that it's just one of those things. It's not um things happen in life, right? And it's not about really what happens to us, it's about how we respond to what happens to us. And so for a long time, and why I say this is in development, I am actually a soft skills facilitator. I am certified under the Franklin Covey um, brand.
Yeah.
And yeah, and a lot of corporations will teach that, they of course to better the employee, but of course essentially to get a better employee to do the job that needs to get done, right? And what I have found is, in my experience with corporate America, sometimes it can be a popularity contest, and you can be the best you can be, but at the same time, you may not get the recognition that you think you deserve, or that you actually in fact do deserve. And I kind of wanted to, my message to people is to kind of like take yourself out of that, right? Because we've got to live this life, and that's all there is to it. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have got to live this life. And what I want is, when I know what good feels like. I know what good feels like, because there's been a lot of times I work really hard, and I know what good feels like. I know what good times feel like. I know what good friendships feel like. I know what love feels like. And I want nothing more than for everyone to experience that feeling. And I feel like, in order to get there, we've got to hone a lot of our own strengths, and we've got to emphasize those things. So really, that's really what it is. All of the treasures that we come with, it's in there. It's all in there. So I just want us to unlock them. I just want us to all
Yeah.
unlock them. And I want the message, again, it can fit into the corporate space, because for me, hard skills are hard skills. You can, build a website with the best of them. You can balance a balance sheet with the best of them. I'm an accountant. So I say that. But at the end of the day, what matters is, how do we treat each other in the workspace? How do we treat each other in the grocery store? How do we treat each other in the gym? Do we have compassion, consideration? Are we giving each other grace? Are we able to, speak up and be assertive for ourselves, knowing our worth? And that's not just in the workplace. Of course, in the workplace, that's negotiation right there. But at home, it's boundaries. And it's boundaries everywhere, right? It's like, this is my worth. This is what I deserve. And I won't settle for less. And sometimes that's really difficult for people to articulate because it seems arrogant. I grew up feeling like it was arrogant. Who are you to say, but at the end of the day, again, closed mouths don't get fed. And I know what it is that I need to survive. And I have to be the one to ask for it. Nobody can ask on my behalf. So that's really my message, is just owning your voice, harnessing your voice, because, and again, going back to stoicism, you don't own your reputation. Anybody could say anything or whatever, and another person can absolutely believe that. But what you can own is how you show up in the world. You can own that. You can absolutely own that. And that's important to me. That's my message. So, and for the longest while, it had been, own your story and own your reputation, whatever. Your reputation will always precede you if someone gets there first. But guess what? A person has to have enough wisdom to know that what is your experience with me, and you should proceed accordingly. So it all comes down to, how am I showing up in the world, and is it my best? And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm living that, because self-love is such a part of that. You said knowing your worth, and something else that came up that you said in our previous conversation that is a theme for me is, what's for you is for you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're interconnected, and I've had to, when I invest in myself, when I love myself, when I understand my worth, when I accept who I am and don't, try to sit back from who I am and not own who I am, when I actually own it, then things happen for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm in the flow. I'm in the flow because God loves me. But if I shriek away from who
Yes.
I am, I'm shrieking away from who God knows me to be. I'm not living in that space. And that requires self-love.
Here is how I can quantify self-love, right? And again, it can go to the Buddhist principle. It can, we're I am the vine, ye are the branches. You are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the whole ocean. I am not a star in you. I am the universe. Like, if you look outside of us is infinite, but
Yeah.
so is inside. Think about that, right? And so I say that to say, you're not a drop in the ocean. You're the whole entire ocean. And as long as you're flowing with the current, I mean, listen, when you flow, you get to exactly where you need to get to, where you're supposed to go. When you fight against it, you struggle and you drown.
Yes.
And so that's kind of how I like to think about that, is that you're always going to be led to where you're going to go. And this is a philosophy, like I said, it's been taught in Buddhism, and it's in Christianity too. God orders your steps. It's the same thing. And so that's why, and kind of going back to what you said about me having learned, I mean, I learned the three main religions from a Catholic priest in 2 semesters of theology, which are probably the most profound in my walk with spirituality, because growing up in a Christian household, in one manner that it's taught, it's like, you can't do X, Y, Z, or I'm not going to see you in heaven later on. And then you start to feel afraid, and I resent fear. And so that caused me to kind of just explore all of these other paths. And then it comes full circle. Your steps are ordered. You're not going to stray too far from where you're supposed to be. You're not. And if you do, you will be brought back,
Yeah. And do you think this is how I tend to think, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are, that our steps are ordered, and that it's not separate. Like, we have free will, and it's not separate from our free will, because our passion, that passion inside of us, is God's will. And God is trying to he's not trying to, he's ordering our steps.
Oh, yeah.
that are connected to our free will. And it's when we resist that
You know you're
that
resistant,
problems arise for us.
and that's how you know. Believe me, let me tell you something, and I'll share a little quick story with you. I'll try to make it quick. But so I tell you, I'm a tax accountant, right? And it has been the most challenging, and I've been a tax accountant for over 20 years, and it has been a struggle to see promotion, struggle to, get information, and just it's not the easiest work, right? I can do it. I've honed a skill and I can do it. It's a very hard skill, but I've got
Mhm.
that hard skill. But at the same time, all throughout my college education, I had met an audit professor, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to go into tax," and his face was like, "I don't think you should do that." And then I'm like, "Just because you said I shouldn't do it, I'm going to do it." And then I took a public speaking class, and my public speaking 2 semesters, and my public speaking professor said, "You're in the wrong major, and you need to switch your major to public speaking." And I said, just because she said I'm going to switch my major, I'm not going to switch it. And I can tell you that, again, to come to a full circle moment, public speaking is my passion. I love it. It's what I want to do. And then I sit here thinking about it, like if I had just listened to her 20 plus years ago, I would have been doing it all along. But instead, I've been struggling in this accounting job, in this tax job all throughout. And I know where I see myself in 5 years. It's not really as a tax accountant. It's not as a tax accountant. I say that with conviction. But I say that to say that is my living testament for the last 20 something years. Thank God I've got the opportunity to make a shift now. But I've been struggling with it, and it's God's message. Like, I was ordering your steps all that while ago, but you resisted and you resisted. And I have felt every bit of that resistance up until this day. And it's not until now that I'm at this age and stage that I'm knowing that surrendering is the path of least resistance, will give you the quantum leap. How ironic, right?
Yes.
Letting go, do the least to get the most.
Yes.
I've been most to get mediocre.
Yeah.
So
It's just let go. Just
let
let
go,
go. Yeah.
let go.
That's
Flow.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, uh, how would you describe your knowing of God and your relationship with God?
Peace. Absolutely un just I don't even know the right word. Just an peace. Absolute peace. It's how I make my choices now. It's how I make my decision. So I've always been a decision maker, right? And it's like you're going to have a 50-50 shot, right? I pray about things. I pray about it because I know that God wants the best for me. Why would I be so? Again, I have interests that span across every aspect. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of my most favorite scientists ever, he said, the likelihood of you being here as a human, of all the human beings that could have existed that never did and never ever will, you are here. And
Now,
so now,
now.
yes. And well, he means ever, because they're like, even the life that we've got, the 7 billion or 8 billion population that we've got, and all of the thousands of years we've been here, in all of that existence, there are still souls that will never come to be, but we have, right? And so for me, I think about the magnitude of that, and I know that regardless of all of the things that I've been through in life, that any of us have been through, they've not been the easiest. And we are absolutely inheriting our prior generations' traumas. And we have the opportunity to break those traumas, right? You just think about the things that our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers and so on have experienced, that they instilled, right? They develop fears and limitations and things like that just because of their experiences. And those are the generational traumas that they pass down to us. And now, feeling those traumas palpably, with times being so much different than what they used to be, I can only turn to God for true answers. And so when I do, I know that when I pray about a thing and I have to go either left or right, if left, I'm not too sure about, but for some reason, right, I have total peace with. I know right is the answer, because that's our GPS. That's the GPS that God gives us. And I know, a lot of people, you can say a lot of things about emotions and, oh, you should take your emotions out of this, that, there. But our humanness, as sometimes limiting and hindering as it can be for us, is such a miracle. It is how we navigate through this life. And our emotions are that GPS system. And we've got to know discernment. We've got to know when to use it and when not to. When is it true and when is it the sugary cake you ate last night? But at the same time, I think that it comes with just knowing, right? And you have to be in touch with yourself. Just like you said, it all kind of ties into self-care, spiritual care, and that personal relationship with God. Because if God lives within us, which he or she does, right? God is omnipresent, not male nor female. And I mean, this is right there in the Bible. So for me, it's God is love. God is that presence, that God is that essence. And how much more powerful are we when we gather together? God is in numbers now, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And which is why we're always meant to be together. So all of that to say that my knowing of God is the peace that I have within my soul, within my spirit, that I know that I'm doing the right thing, because otherwise I'm not going to feel so peaceful if it's
Yeah.
not.
I I ask people sometimes what is their superpower, like what is their innate gift. And one of mine is that I see people,
Mhm.
like I see the essence of people. And if that paid money, I'd be a billionaire. but but anyway, like
Yeah.
I see you, and you are a such a gifted person
Oh,
that I know that. And what I'm saying to you, what I want to say to you, I know that it's true for everyone. I know that we all have a purpose and
yes.
everything. I just see it so clearly with you. Okay.
Oh,
So I see that, you are here for a purpose. You
oh.
are here for a purpose, and you are here to impart what you're here to impart,
Mhm.
through God. Like I see it so clearly. And it's just about, when you decide, like you could have decided 10 years ago, you could decide today, tomorrow, like you are so here for a purpose, a
Oh, yeah.
high, 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 high purpose. That is divine. That's my whole point. That is divine. Like I really see it. I really do.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I will say this. I don't think that that can be seen without connecting with people like yourself. So I think that for me, that's one of the things. And so I say all of that because I tend to shelter myself from the outside world. It's been protective up until this point, but I think it's much more of it's limiting myself. And when I encounter souls like you, because I think you're brilliant, it's wonderful, I love talking to you, I
You.
think it draws out of me. So for you to see that, you ought to see yourself, because it's a mirror image. And i i I shine brightly in the midst of other light. If that,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. And that's true for all of us.
absolutely it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. So what do you think your superpower is, or one of your, you know, divine, the divine aspects of your powers?
I think what I will say that I've been able to do over a span of time, and it's come with career and all of that, is I am able to see people and make them feel seen where they might otherwise not, because I've been there, and I never I never really wanted to dim my light. Putting a shield over myself and keeping myself away from out of that space is my own doing. But I know that whenever tasked with entering a space or making connections with people, I make them feel human before they can feel anything else. Because, and that goes to speaking to, I don't know if you ever heard of, if you'll speak to the janitor the same as you'll speak to the CEO. It's really that simple, because we are all the same, we all have the same value, right? We're here, and everything and anything that we do serves a purpose for all of our good. So I try to make people feel seen, and where you think that you might be, and I'm this way and that way, and I can't, change is possible and it's inevitable. And you don't ever have to remain the same as you are right now. You just don't. And so I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is that I kind of encourage people, like, you think oh, I don't eat that, I don't do that. If you just open your mind up a little, you would be surprised at what you can do and
Right.
who you can be and who you may actually be, but you're denying it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I that's what I kind of just like crack people open in that sense, like just open up and just see where life takes you, because life is so beautiful and it's so grand, and time is so fleeting. We've only got such a small amount of time here. We want to live it up to the maximum, because that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why I can't fear God in the sense of being afraid. I can revere God in the sense that I will do everything that God wants for me on this in this time that I'm here, and that's live life to the fullest, and and have wealth. And wealth doesn't necessarily mean riches. Wealth is love. If you have friends that surround you, that's wealth. If you have wisdom to share and you can pour in, that means it's running out of you. That's wealth, right?
Yes.
So
Wow.
yeah.
So I want just two more quick questions.
Okay.
And one of them is that when we talked before, you talked about your grandmother, and I could see that she was clearly a big influence on you and that she was very wise. And so, could you speak to her and her influence on you and
Oh
what
yeah.
she was about?
Well, that's her looking over my shoulder right back. And she raised me. My grandmother raised me. I was born a premature baby, and my mom was afraid that she wasn't able to handle me. Being I was born like 2 months premature. I was 4 pounds. So I wasn't supposed to survive beyond a day. And they told my mother that if I did, that I might have a chance. So my mom was afraid, and I was delicate. So she dropped me off with my grandmother to be raised. And I can't, I was handled with delicate gloves my whole entire life. But one thing my grandmother always instilled in me is, no matter how, if I was bad at a thing, because I love to cook, and I probably shared this with you. I love to cook. I love it. And I was terrible at it. I used to be terrible at it. And my grandmother, she wasn't, she was very serious when it came to Jesus or whatever. Everything else, no, she was real fun. But I would cook and I would be terrible at it. And, like my family members, they don't realize, people just don't realize that making fun of somebody really has an impact on them. And everything else had impact on me, but not that. Because whenever I would make something and someone would laugh at me, she would be like, try again, don't give up, keep going, try again, don't give up. And that was one thing that she instilled in me with my gifts and my talents. I mean, I've done a bunch of stuff. I would write books, and I would write plays as a kid, and she cared, and she told me, just keep going, just don't stop, don't give up. So that's one thing I would say, if I could take anything. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, real hard, but
Relax.
that's one thing I would say. I never forget the moment. I could sit and I can see her in that moment looking at me, and she looked at me sternly, and she's like, don't you stop, don't you give up. So
And so she's passed away.
yeah, she passed away in 2012. She had a long battle with breast cancer, and so she'd finally passed away in 2012. But she lived a good long life, and she's impacted all of us, and we're little bits of her, feisty and wise. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if someone wants to keep up with you and really, be in the know when you do launch your business, how can they do that?
well, they can follow me on Facebook, Francisca Perez. I am on Facebook, and I definitely don't do too much personal stuff. I mean, I do. I'll share personal stuff on my page, but I do share a lot of business, a lot of insight, and a lot of inspiration. Also, I will be rolling out my website soon, which is thepivot.agency.com. So as soon as that is up and live, I will also be sharing that on my page. So
Wonderful. Well, I am so grateful for you, and I hope that we can do this again.
I do. I'm more than happy to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this because I think it's wonderful what you're doing. The world needs healing, and it starts with you and me, and everybody joins you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrienne. So nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all Let's Start Healing episodes on traditional platforms, and share Let's Start Healing with at least one person you know. Subscribe to the podcast, like the episode. Until next time, let's start healing.